Hello ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, my name is Brad. This is my channel Animate Orange and welcome to a Metal Earth review. Today we're going to review the Metal Earth build of Han's Speeder from the Star Wars lineup, specifically one of the 4 or 5 releases for the Solo movie. It came out, just recently came out on Blu-ray. Came out in the theaters a while back, and that's when these were released, and I've just recently gotten around to building this one. Now there were 4 Metal Earth models and 1 Iconics model, and I've already built the Iconics Falcon, Lando's Falcon, and this is one of the speeders from the beginning of the movie that Han stole and used to get away, and this is the review of that build. This was a enjoyable model. I would easily say it was a medium build. It wasn't particularly difficult. It wasn't on the easier side. Solid medium build. Looks pretty neat. There's a fair amount of round shapes and a few oval shapes that are a little bit of a challenge, but nothing too terribly difficult. Most of the stuff is, or a lot of stuff is just angle pieces. Nothing too tiny, nothing too outrageous, nothing too exceptional to put together. So a good solid medium build, fun to do. You end up with this neat little craft that you see me waving around before you. And I did enjoy it. Now, on the downside, I would say that I'm not real happy about how some of this side area here lined up. And it's possible that I just didn't quite get the angles exactly the way they should be. There's a front piece here that's kind of difficult to judge how you're supposed to angle that, and there's a piece that attaches to it that should give you an idea of how to angle it, but it didn't seem to be quite right. Now this long side piece here that attaches in, that one's difficult to judge how much you're supposed to angle it, and some of the parts get in their own way to keep you from bending it as much as it looks like maybe you should. So I have a little trouble with that particular side, and that could have been just I got the angles wrong, or maybe a part on wrong that knocked everything out of alignment. But from a distance and overall, it doesn't look too bad. A little bit off, but not too bad. Otherwise, it came together fairly simply. The almost motor looking pieces right here came together rather well. The window turned out wonderful. I was concerned about the window, and it's kind of hard to explain just how to do it, but this is a flat piece, as all of them are when you start out, and when you go to bend these curves, you want to place the drill bit or dowel rod or whatever you use to give that curve. You don't want to have it going straight up and down the part. You want to have it tilted out at a slight angle in that area where it's supposed to bend, and if you get that angle just right, when it bends around, you'll end up with this perfectly curved shape that fits the model excellently. And I hate to put anybody down, but I think this windshield fits this model better than the one that they have on their website, on Metal Earth's website. The one that they built doesn't fit as nicely, so yay me. I'm rather proud of myself for that. I did make a couple of mistakes myself, one of which is I forgot to curve this bottom piece up before I attached everything, and that's not that big a deal. Kind of fold the tab out of the way and pinch the bottom part up, and it's not that noticeable. I did this rear piece here, I did kind of mess up, and one you can see the engraving for the fold lines, and one you cannot. Honestly not sure which way it's supposed to be, but honestly you're building it, it's up to your preference. I think I'd probably go with the smoother side out, so I just kind of wasn't paying sufficient attention when I did that, and folded one way and one the other. Now there were some parts here and there that I had a little bit of trouble getting them to fit. They were a little bit tight, and that just not necessarily a reflection of the quality of the design, but just possibly I didn't bend the tabs or parts quite right to make them fit smoothly. So there were a few parts where I had to kind of squeeze and get things into place, and that's not that uncommon for these models. It is a little bit of a guessing game getting the parts exactly right. Sometimes you have a guide, and sometimes you just do the best you can. But no serious trouble. There were several times during this model where I curved parts, but I didn't use a specific shaping tool like a cone or a drill bit or a dowel rod. I just kind of did it by hand, and there were some areas where I used the tweezers, like on this engine part here, where you just kind of grab the metal and bend a little bit, and then slide down and bend a little bit, and then slide down and bend a little bit. And if you do that carefully and just do kind of a soft bend and not try to hold and do a sharp pressure point bend, you can end up with a gentle curve and shape like some of the parts on this, what almost looks like a air cleaner cover or something on the engine. I don't know what it actually is in imaginary life, fantasy life, whatever this is, because you know this isn't technically a real thing. But that's one way you can do that. And then there's part 61, and if I remember correctly, it's this sort of oval shaped piece right here in the front grill area. And that is so small. The idea of, I mean, I have a drill bit that's about that small that may work, but it's such a tiny little part. Trying to get that drill bit in there and do both of those curves the way the pieces are, because it's more than one piece, didn't seem feasible. So if you take, that's another one of those pieces, I took the flat nose pliers that I have, and I did a similar trick to where I grabbed the part with the flat nose pliers, and I didn't try to make a sharp bend. I tried to make a gentle bend by pulling more down on the back and then trying to do a sharp twist with the pliers. I did sort of a gentle fold, and that gave it a little bit of a curve. And if you work it carefully down and then work the other side and get the two pieces around so they're almost closed, and if you do it right, give it a little pinch to shut it, those curves will work out. It was easier for me to do it that way than try to use a specific tool to shape it, because it's so tiny, and it worked out good. It's a bit tricky to do, so it may not work out as well for you, but do the best you can. Just try not to do a twist. Try to do a gentle kind of fold farther out on the handle of the tool to give it a little bit of a curve as you're bending it. I had some issues with, there's a flat piece under here, under this curved part, that I had issues getting it to line up with those two tabs. I ended up scratching it, and that worried me at first, but then it's covered up by this little cover, so that didn't turn out so bad. I had a little, just trying to get it on several attempts with fine tip tweezers, just ended up scratching it, but it ends up covering it up, so that wasn't a big deal at all. One piece of advice: when you are bending this bottom part with the fins on it, there's two side pieces that fold up, and for the first side piece I just folded it up. I didn't think nothing of it. But because this metal right here is so thin, it bent. It didn't bend sharply on the angle where it should have. It bent some of the thin metal with it, and I had to go back and flatten that back out and try to correct it. So what I would suggest is, when you're doing this part with the little thin fin pieces or thin areas of metal, hold the center part with your pliers or with some sort of tool and bend the outside or the side piece up with your fingers with some other tool, so that it bends in the proper area and doesn't just warp the part. Because you end up with really thin parts like that, can warp easily, and I should have saw that coming, but I didn't, because it's such a long part, and the angle that I was doing, I didn't quite foresee it, but I should have. So there's a tip there: hold that whole solid piece down with something and bend the side up with something else or your fingers, and you'll end up with a cleaner build. Or you'll end up with a cleaner bend, I should say, not build. And there's a little tiny piece underneath both sides that connects, and it has a slight curve, and I misread the directions at first, because it shows you one side of the model and both of the pieces are on this side, and it took me a second to realize one of those pieces doesn't attach to this side, it attaches underneath to the other side, and I didn't flip it around properly when I put it on that side, and ended up with the curved parts outward when the curved part should have been inward, because it fits along the edge of the curve of the piece that it's connecting next to. And one last big tip: the two halves. You always end up with some sort of top and bottom half, or two side halves that you end up putting together, and with this is no exception. This bottom piece, while I wouldn't really call it a half, it's only a few pieces compared to the top. When you go to attach that on, I originally tried to start at the rear and work my way forward, and that wasn't the best of ideas. I would strongly suggest hooking this curved side in first, because some of it has to go under this light type fixture here and under the engine. More so in the front was an issue, I think, and you've got the tabs that they have to hook into, and if you try to put this side straight on, and then you have the issue of trying to push the tabs up and into their spot while having this round area in the way, preventing you from doing so. So if you start with this top part at an angle, hook those pieces in and rotate it down, that is a much better option of doing it than starting in any of the other sides. That's my opinion. Of course, you can do it however you feel like, but that seemed to work better for me. But again, to recap, overall it's a solid medium build. It's not terribly complicated and not terribly long. It took me 2.5 hours to build. Pretty par for a Star Wars type or licensed model. So it didn't feel like it took a long time, which is a bonus. Sometimes you do a model and it takes 2 hours, but it feels like 3. And sometimes you do a model that takes 3 hours and it feels like 1.5. This one didn't quite feel like 2.5 hours, but that's how long it took me to put it together. and that's the entirety, clipping out all the parts and lining and shaping and putting them together. So it's really not that long. It's worth the effort. It's a neat little model to add to your collection. The only real criticism I have, aside from this maybe not lining up as well as it should, which again could be my fault, otherwise it comes together good, but the one criticism I have, and I really can't blame this on this model or on Metal Earth or their design, is this bar. I don't know what's up with this almost roll bar thing here. It's off centered, and at first I thought, well, that's because this side is missing a fender. It doesn't have that round cover like the other side has, and that's kind of a ongoing theme in Star Wars, to have a fender or piece missing. Apparently complete vehicles are just not a thing in that universe. But if you look at it, this side, well, for one, it's a solid bar, and this side is, or a thicker bar, and this side is thinner. But this side lines up slightly on the inside center of this engine, and this one's completely on the outside of the engine. So I don't know what that's about, and that just kind of bugged me a little bit that that's off-centered. But that's not a Metal Earth thing. They certainly designed this model to mimic what was in the movie, and I'm sure if I go back and study the movie, I'll find the same problem in that. But I do enjoy this almost engine-looking, carbureted air cleaner feel that we've got going on here. And otherwise, it comes together fairly cleanly and easily. Neat little model. I'll leave it at that. There's more solo models to build. Infa's Nest and the other speeder, Murloc speeder, I think it is, as well as the AT carrier or hauler. Still got to build those as well. I'll put a link in the description at the very end of this video to a full build of this if you're curious to see how I put it together in its entirety, or at least most of its entirety. It's edited down a little bit, but it has all the key points in there. If you want to watch a build of that video, I'll put a link to that as well. This is just a review. And if you enjoy these build videos or these review videos, consider becoming a Patreon supporter. Just a little bit goes a long way to help keep these build videos and these review videos coming. Find also a link to that in the description down below and at the end of this video. Thank you for watching, and keep on keeping on.